Hello.
Hi there. We're getting a lot of people joining right now, so hold on
Okay.
tight.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
Okay, I can see commissioners. There we go. Hello. So it looks like that's hopefully working. All right, well, we've got a really good crew here today. And so what I'm going to do my best to just go ahead and kick this off and then still watch the participants coming in, and hopefully I won't leave anyone sitting there for too long. But I really appreciate everyone for being here today and taking the interest because we all know how impactful these elections are for all of us. I just wanted to make note the commission is having their workshop today in Riverton, and someone's done the magic to make sure that they can participate and see us as well. And so welcome to everyone who's in Riverton. And please just raise a hand, holler, however, type chat, whatever works to just get my attention if you need me or if you have a question. With that, I am going to go ahead and I have some slides to share, so I'll be sharing my screen. And there we go. It's like, where did it go? So I'll kind of talk through this a little bit as we go, but like always, just raise your hand or catch my attention and I'll be able to hopefully answer your questions in that space. So we'll go ahead and look at some of these results. I'm not gonna hit the too much of what you can read in the news, right? We all know Representative Hageman and Senator Barrasso did quite well with their elections. They both have opponents in the general election. On the Democrat side, I don't expect either one of them to have really much trouble in that space. But the big news, as we all know, is with the legislative races. So let's go ahead and jump in there. By the way, if you're not an election night geek like I am for the general election, if you're interested, Cowboy State Daily did a live blog, if you will, where they had commentators running for a few hours that evening. And it was just like we're looking at now, a Zoom with, 6 or 8 people or so, political experts from across the state of different persuasions politically. And it was really neat to just kind of listen to them throughout the night. Wyoming Public Media has, I think, the best running of real-time results in terms of race-by-race coverage. So I just thought I would give you a few little hints. Secretary of State's office doesn't post anything until 100% are in. And so they're kind of let's use them to double check everything. But in terms of race by race and what's coming in, some of those other sources are a little bit better. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the House and the Senate. What I thought I would do here is just give you a little bit of a snapshot of where they are now. Of course, I'm not going to tell you where they are after the primary because it's not decided all the way, right? It's not over till it's over, and we need that general election to happen first. So right now, the Senate has 29 Republicans and 2 Democrats. The balance of power isn't between the Republicans and the Democrats, as you all know. It's between more of the Freedom Caucus persuasion and what people are calling themselves of the Wyoming caucus, and then there are the Democrats who tend to usually align more with Wyoming caucus in terms of the big votes. So the balance of power in the Senate for the last couple of years has been within 1 or 2 votes, where it could swing either way. Some members of the Senate are considered swing votes on some issues. Some of them align with one side or the other, depending on what the issue is. So the Senate has been the really tricky spot for the last couple of years, given that that margin is so thin. The House is a different animal, or has been, with 5 Democrats and 57 Republicans, but the balance of power has been about 26 Freedom Caucus members to 36 Wyoming Caucus members or so. Enough so that the Freedom Caucus hasn't had a majority in that space. What I'll tell you, I'm going to give you the spoiler alert right off the top, in that with the House, I believe that the Freedom Caucus has gained enough seats right now, even with the seats that they lost, to earn that majority in the House. The House saw a tremendous amount of turnover, about 40%. So it was a really pretty big year in terms of turnover, and then shifting balance of power, which in Wyoming we don't have a lot of, right? We have super majorities, but in my lifetime we haven't had another faction becoming as strong like the Freedom Caucus has in this space to earn a majority in terms of voting, which will impact all sorts of things. So with that, I will go ahead and just give a few general insights. And so if you think about where people are in terms of leadership in the House right now, the current Speaker of the House, the current Majority Whip, and the Speaker Pro Tem all will not be returning for one reason or another. And I don't have this laid out particularly in a map format, but once I walk through the results, I want you to pay attention and really think about what parts, picture the state of Wyoming, and look at what that might look like in terms of turnover. The southwest corner of the state, and right here where I live in the southeast corner of the state, took really significant hits in terms of the number of incumbent losses, particularly. Something that's really significant to consider is that not only are we talking about leadership in the House, it's committee chairman. So all of these committee chairmen are not returning either from retirement or from having lost their race. For the community colleges, this is significant because David Northrup on the House side did not win his election. That's significant for us. He's been a long time champion for all of education, particularly higher education and the community colleges. So that's a really big hit for the support for the things that are important to the colleges. The House Travel and Recreation Committee, Wildlife and Cultural Resources Committee, Sandy Newsom retired. So that's one of the chairmen in that space. House Corporations, Jared Olson, is running for the Senate. So maybe we don't lose them all together, but we lose them in the House. And so one of the chairmen in a committee that has, all of the committees do big work, right? And they are experts in their areas. But when you lose a long-standing committee chairman who's been there a long time, you lose a lot of institutional knowledge. So that's why I'm walking through the committee chairman with you. House Minerals, Business and Economic Development, Representative Burkhart has retired, and so we'll lose him in that space. Labor Committee is Dan Zwanitzer, who in my community did lose his election. Dan is the second longest serving legislator in the House right now. He's kind of one of those behind Steve Harshman that I like to say we all kind of grew up together in this space. So we lose a lot of institutional knowledge with Dan Zwanitzer losing his election as well. House Rules Committee, it's really not his main role. Speaker of the House was his main role, but Albert Summers, you probably already heard, lost his bid to move over to the Senate to fill the seat of Senator Baldwin. What's really significant for this group here together today is what happened to the Appropriations Committee. And I'm going to say this with a grain of salt because in an election year, new leadership will be elected. After the general election, both the House and the Senate will caucus and they will elect new leaders. And there will likely be significant turnover in the committees. Now, given the fact that we do have a shift in, like I said, leadership majority in the House, we will likely see all new committee chairmen, is my prediction. Also on appropriations, many people who have served on this committee for a long, long time lost their elections. And so that's when we look at Clark Stith, Tom Walters, Dave Zwanitzer, Bill Henderson, and then Senator Kinski retired. So 5 members of the Appropriations Committee who we all know the funding for the community colleges and many of the issues that are important to us. And this year's a great example. Look at 95% of our issues were in the budget bill this year. These people matter on appropriations. And so this is going to be something to watch, is how does the Appropriations Committee come back together, who's elected or appointed chairman, and what that means in terms of education and outreach on our end to make sure that people really understand how things work for the community colleges at the commission, WACCT. We're going to all have to really work together to partner to build those relationships and do what we can to answer questions and figure out where the pockets of or the gaps in information and learning need to take place. So what I thought I would do next is kind of outline some of the key races that people were really watching. And I left a couple off here because they won their race, but I'll mention them as we talk through these. These were significant losses that I'll outline right here. I already mentioned Dan Zwanitzer here in Cheyenne. His father, Dave Zwanitzer, who's my representative, I think surprised some people. Dan Zwanitzer, and I'm just going to say this right now. We've all read the news articles in the last 2 days. There's been a lot of, a lot of people giving their opinions about why this happened. I think voter turnout was pretty low. The general, we expect, given that it's a presidential election, maybe higher. All these things impact it, but one thing that we've read consistently is the impact, and I guarantee each and every one of you have seen this, the impact that the negative mailers and text messaging, we're getting campaign stuff on our devices now, against candidates was unprecedented. Largely coming from out-of-state money as best we can track it. Dan Zwanitzer, excuse me, Dan Zwanitzer alone, I heard, had over 22 to 25 hit pieces, as they're called, put out on him. Our mailbox was full every other day, I swear, on Dave Zwanitzer, putting out information that I will tell you, working in this work, I know what was on those flyers was not the truth. It was flat out misrepresented or made up information. And so it was a really different animal this year to try and campaign and fight against this sort of campaign that's coming from somewhere else. Maybe it's not coming from the opponents, but it's coming from somewhere else. So that I just wanted to give you a sample of what's happened here in Cheyenne. I know many of you saw it in other parts of the state. Tom Walters was a big surprise to a lot of people. I didn't expect him to come away with a loss this year. Ember Oakley and Lloyd Larson. Lloyd's not on this slide. Lloyd won his race. Ember did not. Up in Riverton. And Lander, those were 2 races that people were really watching. I already mentioned Dave Northrup, Bill Henderson here in Cheyenne. Bill's district, over the years has gone different ways in terms of Republican versus Democrat with the redistricting. I think it is more heavily Republican. But he did not win his primary bid. That person will face a Democrat in the general election. And so what I'll say is the results are what they are now, but there's still several races that have yet to be determined in the general election. And so things could change. I don't know how much of, given that it is a presidential election, maybe that boosts some of the Democrats who are running in some of these races. I'm not sure. But that's something that we'll all have to look at come November. Another race or an area that a lot of people were really concentrating on was the Rock Springs, Green River area. Of the people that were really working hard for JT Larson and Cody Wiley, Clark Stith, Tony Niniak, Clark Stith and Tony did not win their races. The others came out okay. Some of these races were very close margins, 30 votes, maybe 50 votes, some of them less. And so that goes to show you that every vote counts, right? And believe me, I preach it. I had 2 new voters in my house this year with my son and my daughter. So I was really proud that they went and voted today. But another upset that a lot of people weren't quite expecting, but it was a different part of the state. Albert Summers moving from a House district up in Sublette County to a far larger Senate district that really spans between Sublette County and Uinta County, I think just brought him a little bit more of a challenge. And so Albert will not be moving forward this year in either the House or the Senate. And so I just provided a map so you can kind of picture, where these races were really taking place, the southwest corner, the southeast corner, and of course there were some other hotspot races in the middle of the state. But this is kind of the neat part that I wanted to share with you, because I took the opportunity to break out your legislators by college. And so what this slide will be showing you is all the legislators who are in Casper College's district. The ones that are in red did not win their election, or they're going away for whatever reason. Let's look at Senator Landon up here at the second one at the top. There's no new legislator mentioned. That's because he was not up this cycle. Does that make sense? Senator Anderson, the top one, he was up for re-election and he won his election. So you see, that's what that means. This year, because of this dynamic between Wyoming Caucus and Freedom Caucus, I included this third column in the middle for affiliation on which way people identify, or which way I think they identify. So I'm going to put a big old grain of salt out there and ask folks to recognize that if these aren't correctly characterized, I appreciate input. There are some people I haven't met, but given news stories and my ability to research, network, and all of the things, this is where I think things have kind of fallen out in terms of where people stand with their affiliations. I wanted to also just give a shout out to our friends at the Wyoming Business Alliance, because a really critical resource that I used was their 2024 primary election guide. All of the colleges belong to the Business Alliance, and so hopefully you all had access to this. They also held a networking event in Casper about a month ago, which was really fantastic. It was like speed dating, and we got to meet all of the candidates who attended. It was a wealth of information, and my book is full of flyers and information from candidates. So I just want to really thank the Business Alliance, and if you get the opportunity to do that, I hope you might too. So let's look at, of all of these legislators, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are not returning for Casper College. That's not insignificant. Jeanette Ward from Casper, who is really just factually and publicly one of the most outspoken Freedom Caucus members, was beat by a woman named Julie Jarvis. I think Julie identifies more with the Wyoming caucus way of thinking. She's yet to carve her own path, so we'll see. Representative O'Hearn and Obermuller and Chadwick all retired. So they just didn't run again. Those were all open seats. And again, I mentioned the surprise of Tom Walters. Tom he's critical in terms of partnering on appropriations, really having a solid understanding of the budget. And he's someone who can really sit down with just about anybody and explain how it works. And I think that's a gift. Not everybody has that. Tom is also a pretty, pretty well-known supporter for the University of Wyoming. And so I know that's going to be a tough hit for them. So if you think about that appropriations committee, that's so significant. And I've actually been telling that to others on calls like this, where we're talking about the elections, because a lot of people are kind of skipping over the committee chairman and the makeup of that appropriations committee. What happens to that committee will be critical. And I'm going to be honest with you, with the way I hear some talking about wanting to slash and burn budgets, I'm really worried about Wyoming's vulnerable people, because yes, they're going to probably cut UW. They're probably going to cut the colleges, but they're probably also going to cut Wyoming's most vulnerable people. So I'm a little worried just about what that whole process might look like. Let's look at CWC. So CWC really landed in a pretty decent space in terms of who might be leaving. However, if you note on the right-hand column where I have the new legislator, if there's an asterisk, that denotes the fact that that person still has a general election. And so I mentioned Ember Oakley, very critical and former community college commissioner. So she is a great supporter for the colleges. We are desperately going to miss her. A race that's still on the forefront of everyone's minds is this race between Sarah Penn, who is of the Freedom Caucus, and Ivan Posey, who's, his district is the reservation district. So I think he'll probably have a pretty strong showing. But a lot of folks are going to be watching that race, and Ivan works for Central Wyoming College as well. So I know a lot of folks up there are supporting him. But by and large, a lot of folks in this space, had a somewhat close election, didn't have an opponent, or came through pretty unscathed. I would say the Lloyd Larson race was probably the closest race here. To accompany this presentation, I'll have these slides available. I also have a write-up that gives a little bit more detail about the races. And then, who's going on to a general election, etc. So I'll be able to provide that as well. Eastern Wyoming College, excuse me, had a couple of folks who weren't up, but who did come through their races. But there's a couple of races here that I wanted to mention. The Bouchard open seat was one race that a lot of people across the state were watching. I think there were 5 or 6 people entered in just the Republican primary side of that, and there is not a Democrat opponent. So it's tough when you split a race that big, right? Someone can win by just a very small margin. Darren Smith did win by a pretty big margin. He is from Cheyenne, and so that district goes from Cheyenne up into Wheatland, so it's a very big district. The other top performer was from Wheatland, and so you kind of see dynamics of from where candidates come from, and then where the votes might congregate in terms of support. Darren did have a Trump endorsement. I don't know if that helped him or not, but he won the seat. Another race that was kind of fun to watch, just because that's why I called all of this stuff fun, but former Representative J.D. Williams he's up from around the Newcastle space. Had the seat a couple of years ago. When Hans Hunt left the seat, he was appointed, and then he ran, and his neighbor, Representative Schlegel, won the seat by, I think, 1 or 2 votes. It was one of the closest races I've seen in a long time. And then J.D. Williams decides he's going to run again, and he won this time. And so that's a seat that's now flipped over a couple of times. But Schlegel definitely identified with the Freedom Caucus. J.D. Williams identifies more with the Wyoming caucus. I'm remiss to mention that Darren Smith up in that Bouchard race, he identifies with the Freedom Caucus. And so I think it's helpful for people to see where folks kind of land in that space, and just knowing what the dynamics might include. Gillette College has no legislators who are leaving, which is a nice for stability. You know, it's the friends you know, and then the people maybe who aren't always your friends, but you know how they work, right? I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. I'm really trying to be politically correct here. But some races had opponents in here. McEwen had an opponent. Angelos did not, Bayer did not, Knapp did not. Clouston had a pretty good race, and Carver, I don't think he had an opponent. So a lot of folks were watching that Clouston race. So Gillette College, you end up with all of the folks that you started with. Here we are for Laramie County Community College. And like I said, lots of turnover, a lot of red on this slide. So folks, remember Laramie County, or LCCC covers not only just Laramie County, but also over in Albany County with their campus over there. So you'll see some of the Laramie legislators on here as well. But right off the bat, you see that Zwanitzer Dave, Zwanitzer Dan, both lost their races to Freedom Caucus members, or proclaimed to be Freedom Caucus members. I'm also giving a grain of salt to say these people have the freedom to be who they want to be. So maybe they won't identify with the Freedom Caucus. We'll see. I think both of them have publicly stated as much. And so that's why I felt confident I could put them there. Some of our Democrat friends in Laramie, they didn't have opponents in their primaries, but they do have opponents in their generals and their Republicans. So Ken Chestick, Trey Sherwood, Carly Provenza, Ocean Andrew. Well, Ocean Andrew is a Republican, but those 4 races all had general elections. And so we'll be all watching how those turn out for them. You know, and Laramie has by population, percentage of population, much like Teton County, a greater percentage of Democrats. So they tend to have more Democrats in their elected officials. So we'll see how those guys come through. Representative Brennan, oh, sorry, she was not up. So that shouldn't have her name on there. She did not have a race this year, but Representative Singh did here in Cheyenne, and he was successful. We have Senator Ellis, Senator Furphy, both retiring. And so those were open races. I mentioned that Jared Olson is going from the House and making an attempt to get elected on the Senate side. Senator Nethercott's opponent withdrew about a month before, or less than a month before the election. And so while his name was still on the ballot, she handily won that election. She does not face a general. Senator Furphy, I mentioned, is retiring over in Laramie. Frank Crum won that primary, and he will face a general opponent on the Democrat side. Mr. Crum, I believe, is a banker from Laramie. He, if any of you watch Cowboy football, his son played for the Cowboys and just got drafted for the Broncos. So that's kind of a little fun fact. They're family friends. So we're all excited to see what happens with our new Wyoming Cowboy playing for the Broncos. But Mr. Crum is, I think, a well-respected person in the Laramie community. And so we'll see how he does in the general election. Another race that was really interesting to watch here in Cheyenne was this race between Ben Hornock, a member of the Freedom Caucus, and Rob Gehringer. He's the son of Governor Gehringer. It's over in the western side of Cheyenne, not my district, but a lot of people that I know live over there. And it was a pretty tight race. Rob did come out on top. And so that's an interesting one, but a notable loss for the Freedom Caucus in that space. Another loss for the Freedom Caucus comes from Tamara Trujillo, who lives on the south side of Cheyenne, who does not always, but more traditionally or more generally than not, she would identify with the Freedom Caucus. But both Tamara and Daniel Singh peeled away from that for the vote on the budget, which I definitely noticed. So I think Tamara and Daniel Singh were both trying to, kind of think a little bit on their own, which I appreciated. Lee Filer, who is a former representative, at the time a Democrat, decided to run against Tamara Trujillo and on the Republican ticket and beat her in that space. So that was an interesting race and a dynamic to watch in Cheyenne. Another race that I already talked about was Bill Henderson. Bill Henderson lost to Gary Brown. Gary Brown will face off against Jen Solis on the general election. But Henderson is always a good supporter of the colleges and on appropriations as well. So that'll be a loss. Jared Olson's seat was open then. A gentleman named Jacob Wasserberger, who I believe is related to the Wasserbergers that we know up in Campbell County. I'm not sure exactly where Jacob's affiliation might land. I have a feeling it might be Freedom Caucus, but I'm not sure. So those are things I'm just trying to keep an open mind about and let people, we'll figure it out as we go. And then Representative Stivar there, he did win his election. A dynamic that I'm hearing already in Cheyenne, at least, is for races where someone lost their seat or whatnot. People are trying to find maybe an independent to run or whatnot to try and overtake whoever won. In a presidential, I don't know how much chance there is of someone like that winning, and that happens from time to time. And it happened last election cycle in some areas of the state. So I'll be interested to see if some of that happens across the state as well. Let's see, Northwest College, let's go up to that neck of the woods. Some close races. People were really watching Ed Cooper's race. He came out on top, but for a while it was a little iffy. Senator French won his race. Dalton Banks did not have an opponent. Representative Northrup, sad loss for all of us. And Representative Newsom's seat was open, but her longtime opponent, Nina Weber, did win that seat over the mayor of Cody. And so that will be an interesting dynamic just to kind of see how Nina comes into that seat. With the exception of Ed Cooper and Martha Lawley, Northwest College, it looks like you are all pretty much in that Freedom Caucus space. So just a dynamic, just putting it out there. Let's look at, oh, my computer froze a little bit. Sheridan College. So Sheridan College also had some pretty decent turnover for the number of legislators in that space. Bo Beitman is the only one who did not have a race because it's just not his year to be up on the Senate. Senator Kinski retiring. Representative Jennings making a go at the Senate side against Barry Crago. Crago came out on top of that. So that was a really hot race to watch. There was a pretty good race with the Jennings open seat between Thomas Kelly and Gail Simons. Thomas Kelly came out on top. So I don't know Mr. Kelly, so that'll be an opportunity to, again, introduce, make friends, educate, all of those things. Craig's seat was filled with a woman named Marilyn Connolly. I have not met her. I've heard good things about her, so we'll kind of have to see what that looks like. And then Cyrus Western seat, open seat filled with Lori Bratton. She was uncontested. So that might be an example where I'm hearing people might be trying to find others to run because that Ms. Bratton was not challenged. So I don't know, just really interesting dynamics that are happening across the state. And now here finally with Western, lots of red on this slide as well. Already talked about Clark Stith, Representative Burkhart retiring, Tony Nemiak not coming through on his election. Bob Davis did win his primary. He's over in Carbon County. However, he does face a general. I'm not sure what to expect on that. The person who beat Albert Summers, her name is Laura Talaferio Pearson. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. I have seen her testify a few times, I believe having to do with mask mandates. She's a bus driver in Sublette County and pretty vocal and outspoken. And so she probably had some pretty good name recognition out there because of that. Senator Dockstader was unopposed or uncontested. Senator Kolb won his primary, but he does have a general election. Hicks was not up. I shouldn't have put his name on there, but I just caught that as I said it. Jones was not up. Andrew Byron did not have an opponent, so he was happy about that. Michael Schmid, who's the former Game and Fish Commissioner, I believe, who filled Albert Summers' seat. I have a question and it's highlighted there because I'm not sure, kind of where he might land with his affiliation. I'm not sure if he's Freedom Caucus or not. So that's why you'll see that in yellow. Scott Heiner did come through with his election. And then we had the seats of Allred retired, so that was an open seat. But John Conrad and Ryan Berger also lost their elections. And those guys were big supporters. This really, I'll just have to say it, Western Wyoming or Southwest Wyoming had a really neat group of incoming freshmen this last year who really worked so well together. And so losing Nemiak and Conrad and Berger, I think is a really big hit for that neck of the woods. So Berger's race was, Ryan Berger was beat by Bob Worf, who had the seat before. So that's another example of kind of going in and, hey, I want my seat back. Now Bob does identify with the Freedom Caucus on several issues, but I'm going to tell you, not always on issues related to the colleges, where some people want to gut the colleges and defund and this and that. Bob Worf isn't always in that space. And so, and he and I have a good relationship. He used to be actually a gun lobbyist. So we might have different points of view on those sorts of issues, but he generally does support the community colleges. So that's why it really helps to get to know people. Relationships are everything. And so I'm not putting up these labels to say we can never talk to these people or they're difficult. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just stating facts. If they've self-identified, everyone's doing this, but it's just good to know and it's information. And then we take that back and we still get to know them and we sit down and we educate and we answer questions. And our community college family is really good at doing that. So I just wanted to mention Cody Wiley and JT Larson too. I think I said it earlier. Those are two of the races people were really, other legislators who had retired or who weren't or didn't have an opponent were coming down to Southwest Wyoming to help these guys campaign because they really knew that they were in a hot spot. I think some people overlooked Laramie County, not expecting it to be as tough as it was here, or maybe another word I might use is vicious in terms of the opposition mailers. So I just feel kind of bad for some of our Laramie County legislators who didn't have the same support. So what's next? Obviously, we've got the general. It's not over till it's over. We'll do something similar leading up into the general. So I'll be happy to walk you all through this again. WACCT is already working on support materials for trustees, for anyone who wants them in terms of, you know, how are the colleges funded? How does the Wyoming Investment in Nursing Program work? Things like that. Wyoming's tomorrow. We're trying to just fill you with resources and information so that you can use them, because guess what happens in the general election? We have trustee elections. And so please, as you trustees are heading out for re-election or helping friends who are signing up to maybe replace your seat or whatever that looks like, please let me know if there are resources that you think you need and you don't have. Okay, I'm happy to work to help you in that space. I'm also happy to meet with candidates. If there's people who you think would be a really great trustee and you can get them to say yes to put their name on the ballot, and you want to make sure that they have all the information they need. Of course, your college is the first stop they should make, but I'm happy to be a really supportive second in terms of giving them information and whatnot. So that is what I have prepared for everyone here today. I'm happy to take questions and suggestions, whatever it might look like. And just remember, this is recorded. I'll send out the recording. And also we are now taking place in the commission's public meeting. So I just want to remind everybody of the dynamics that are at play right here. Any questions that I can help answer?
I had a lot of questions. I think there's a lot of processing, and now may not be the time. But it seems like this can be huge, I think. And I just can't get my head around it, what huge looks like in terms of, you know, not voting for a budget or something. I'm trying to think, I mean, because there's part of me is thinking like, do we have impending rifts? I mean, I'm trying to think of the 2-year budget cycle. We're kind of good for 2 years, kind of, sort of, right? So no immediate panic in terms of base budget, but probably no supplemental for raises or supplemental for anything like that. But it feels like, is it safe to say that because this was a budget cycle and we have a 2-year budget, we have a little breathing room? Or I'm just trying to think what I need to prepare my, you know, staff for and all this in terms of, you know, cut budget or something like that.
Yeah, Dr. Tyndall, that's a great question. Let me walk you through that. So we're heading into a general session, which is a supplemental budget year. And so, yes, you're correct. The budget for the next 2 years has been set. It took effect July 1. And so this budget is meant for, you know, how they say it, a supplemental emergencies, unforeseen things like that. So the budget is set, Dr. Tyndall, unless they go in and make, you know, something that takes it out of what's already in there, which I would say is less likely than next year in the budget cycle. That's when they set the next budget. That's where I see the most danger, if you will, in terms of the things that you kind of mentioned in your example.
And I understand, I think, and I don't know, I'm looking at other big pieces. I'm thinking that John Wood's on the various IT committees, and I don't know, John was on the phone a minute ago. Is he still out there? No, I think he left. But there was things like paying for the ERP system. There's money necessary for that, not just the new ERP, but to pay for the existing.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm here, Brad.
Okay, John, can you speak to that a little bit? Because these are the kind of things that's going to help us thinking. I think we have to strategize through, you know, whether we have, do things go in the budget bill? Do things go outside? And so, John, I think it's a good kind of case point for people to kind of look at the impact of things to everybody.
So actually, the commission will meet tomorrow here on the CWC campus to finalize their submitted budget to the governor's office tomorrow. And a part of the commission materials indicate a $48 million appropriation for what Dr. President Tyndall is talking about. This is the ERP discussion around a new computer administrative computing system, college computing. I'm going to get it wrong again, Paris. College Administrative Computing System, the CACS. It's basically the software that runs all 8 of our colleges. It's called DataTel Colleague. It does our payroll. It does our student admissions. It does our paying our bills and so forth. It basically runs the college. And the state of Wyoming is requiring us to go out to bid. We could perhaps keep the same vendor, but we would have significant changes if we stayed with the same vendor, or we might go to a different vendor. And the commission is asking for $48 million preliminary ask. That'll get refined as we have consultants working with all 8 colleges to refine that before it goes to the governor. So the governor might refine that a bit, and then certainly might be refined in front of a joint appropriations committee. And Aaron, I think I'm correct in saying that the joint appropriations committee is the old legislators up until the session. And so that December budget hearing is actually our current JAC. Even the ones that have lost the election would be sitting there. So they will prepare the budget preparation for the new legislature, but then they go away. And the fear we have is, well, what happens with a $48 million ask in this current legislative climate? And Aaron, I don't know if you want to talk about that now, or you want to wait till after the general election when maybe you can speak more authoritatively on it. But that's the concern we have in the colleges and in all the IT departments about how do we proceed given this primary election outcome.
So John, if we do not get the 48 million, it's not like, oh, we don't get the new system. It also, that same amount of money would be used to just keep the existing system if we stayed with the same vendor. So if we don't get the 48 million, what does that mean? It means we have to pay for our own ERP?
That's one of the questions we had too. And Paris, I don't know if you're still in the commission meeting room, or Ben, if you'd like to speak to that, or Mackenzie maybe. The commission is statutorily obligated to provide the college with this system. But if the state chooses not to fund it, then what happens and who funds it and how does that work? And these are all hypotheticals, and I don't know to what extent, Ben, you want to speak to that, or Aaron, but it is a concern at the colleges. And Mackenzie, if you can speak towards the statute requirements there. The $48 million is a significant ask for one-time costs in either the upgrade of the existing vendor or going to a new vendor. But it also includes some ongoing costs because part of that upgrade would be to move from an on-prem system to a cloud. Technical details we probably don't want to talk about here too much, but Paris certainly knows the technical details better than I do, and Ben and Mackenzie and Aaron, kind of the political discussion around that.
And I can say just a couple of, I'm sorry. Paris, are you muted? Well, how about can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we hear you great.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Paris, I'll just go off the room system. We need to ask for this preliminary amount because regardless of how they talk us down, or regardless of which system we decide to go with, we need to get this amount out there. And we're really getting the cart before the horse when we start talking about what system we choose and all of these other things. But this is that first step. We're asking for the money, and then we'll go from there.
I guess my question, part of this is, okay, I'm maybe getting a little paranoid here, but I think when we first got wind that there may have been rifts last time, been around, that's when I did a hiring freeze. Because if I know that there may be, so this is what I'm trying to get my head around, like kind of worst case scenario. Let's say we have to pick up our own costs for the ERP to even stay in the existing one. And it's going to cost me $1 million, and it's going to cost, you know, El Chippewa and Casper too, or whatever the formula is for this, you know. And it's just like we kind of have to have this figured out, because I think there's these feels like there could be storms. So people are just going to say no, and I'm going, wow, how do we keep our ERP? I don't know. a lot of questions. I don't want to create terror in people's minds, but we do need to know so that when we tighten belts ahead of time and not just go, oops, shoot, I should have thought that through.
Well, and I think that's a very, I mean, we get into statutory crises when you start talking about things like that. So I don't think this is necessarily the best time to kind of go down those roads. But we can talk about that probably offline.
And it's just good to bring it up. I appreciate that. What this does is, like every election year where things reset, that's to be expected. This year, I think things could just be a little bit, the apple cart might be upset a little bit more. The usuals on appropriation may not be there. So we are expecting some pretty significant changes. So my recommendation for everyone right now is, let's just keep on keeping on. From our WACCT spring committee meeting or planning meeting, we really talked about the fact that we don't have a whole list of big asks. And I'm going to tell you this, I was reflecting on this with my husband the other day because he does this kind of work, and we set up Mission Control Central when it's election night, watching all the results. But we were talking about the gains that the colleges have earned over the last several years and how hard we've been pushing to get a lot of the things that we needed. And a lot of it was money, right? Kind of anticipating that this day could come where we might hit a wall, at least for a little while. This could be the wall. So I just want to tell you that I'm very appreciative and grateful for everyone who worked so hard with me, next to me, and in your communities to make all of that happen. This isn't a doomsday call. We just begin again. We begin with building relationships. And if the Freedom Caucus folks are coming to Cheyenne to say no, it'll have to be a different story when they have to come to Cheyenne to govern, and if they're in leadership. So that's a different role for a lot of them. And so we'll have to see how that shakes out. So someone who really taught me the ropes when I was a little baby lobbyist taught me that the best thing to do is to talk to everybody, whether you know where they're going to be or not. And so that's what we're going to do. So how we strategize about some of the things that have come up today to be continued. Again, we have another election and caucusing. So mid-November, we'll know who the leadership looks like, who the committee chairmen are, the makeup of what might be the new appropriations committee. John is right. They all will go through agency hearings and building a budget in December. Many of the newly elected or selected members of the appropriations committee often attend those hearings so they can learn. I hope many of them do, because there's a lot of learning to do with regard to the budget. And then the new committee will meet in January for I think a week or so, and or 2 weeks even, as they refine and put their own stamp on that budget that was drafted by the former committee. So there's a lot of work. We might be repeating ourselves or having similar conversations, but that's what we have to do. That's the work that's involved. Same thing is going to happen on the education committee as well. I don't know what that committee might look like, but for sure we'll have a new chair in the House. And so we've got some work to do. And where I started to say, but I didn't finish, was that WACCT really landed on telling the good story and really focusing on the students for this year. And so this is a great opportunity to do that, because what I will tell you is that regardless of some people's views of higher education, I do feel pretty strongly that a lot of members of all three parties, or I don't think the Freedom Caucus is necessarily a separate party yet, but Persuasions, Freedom Caucus, Wyoming Caucus, Democrats, we still have very strong support for the community colleges. So I just want to work really hard to continue building that. Are there any other questions that I can answer? I'm looking at all the little squares on my screen and I'm not seeing any hands coming up or nothing in the chat other than thank you. So if that's the case, then I'll let you all go. That we just almost hit an hour, so that was perfect timing. Again, I mentioned this will be recorded. It'll take a little while for it to come back to me, so give me some time before I send that back out again, and I'll send it back out with the resources that I told you about. So with that, everyone, thank you. And then I'll be asking for information as well for trustees who are running and not running, all of that kind of information from your college so that we can keep track of those elections as well. So I appreciate everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.